Hi everyone. So this one's a bit personal for me because this is something that I believed for the longest time and maybe subconsciously still struggle with every day. My scarcity comes from holding my energy every day, my time, the direction of my efforts, and if someone were to take from it, I would be very annoyed. And it's not necessarily a good thing. So today we dive into some assumptions underlying scarcity, then see some studies and look at the behavioral consequences and what can it lead to. So first, to get the definitions out of the way, the scarcity myth is a belief that resources, particularly economic resources, are limited, and that individuals and societies must compete for access to these resources. But and although there's some truth to it, countless studies over the years show that it's not entirely a logically sound argument. So, a few assumptions that underlie the scarcity myth. So, the first assumption is that the most obvious one, the assumption of limited resources. So, first of all, resources are not necessarily finite. In research, we have this idea of an adjacent possible. So, assume that this box here is the depiction of all that's possible. Okay, at this point in time, we only know what's in this black circle. Now, the red circle is the adjacent possible. That's most likely the next innovation or next solution that we'd find. And then the scientists that are considered ahead of their times have found something in the green circle that is adjacent possible to adjacent possible. So if we've just found the yellow circle out of all the possible solutions in the adjacent possible, this circle has now become our black circle. Okay, and this is how research evolved. The point being here is just because a resource is not found yet doesn't mean it's not there. It's just because maybe someone hasn't spent time in that direction to find that kind of solution. Then the second assumption is the assumption of lack of production rather than uneven distribution. This kind of depicts itself in like scarcity of food. It is often the case that resources are not evenly distributed despite there being enough of the production. It can be because of the transportation infrastructures, there's laws, there are borders, some land is more fertile, or just there's a lack of like good way to distribute resources, then the resources themselves are just like scarce. The third assumption is that we all want the exact same thing. Now, according to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's true that all humans have the same core needs. It's your physiological needs, then you have your safety needs, which is also very important, then you have family and love and belonging, then you want self-esteem to be higher or regarded, and then there's the self-actualization, which is, it's not true that all of us are exactly on the same level, or level is not the right word, or need the exact same things, okay? In a 70-year lifespan, you'd have various ups and downs, and at various stages you want different things, okay? And since scarcity produces shortcut mindset, so we suddenly go towards the quickest way to jump to the fourth pyramid and get high self-esteem by ignoring the bottom three, okay? And now we just believe that we want to be there. It's a very ego-driven kind of self-esteem that scarcity brings out in us. And because we believe that there's only few valuable resources, we focus on only those resources. And the interesting part about this whole scarcity mindset is, so everyone's going towards the same resources, and now that resource actually becomes scarce. So the demand is very high, the production is very low, the prices go high, it becomes even more exclusive. But once they increase the supply and now everyone has it, eventually the demand lowers. So we have now created scarcity by believing in scarcity when it did not need to exist. So what we do is, by focusing on an arena at the expense of untapped potential, we lose sight of possible solutions. Okay, so let's go towards some studies. So these two people like studied scarcity in depth, and they've written a number of books. And they have a couple of findings. The first one is that scarcity creates a bandwidth tax. Okay, that reduces your cognitive capacity and negatively impacts the decision making. Okay, and the second one is people with a scarcity mindset struggle with decision making and tend to prioritize immediate needs over long term goals, leading to a cycle of poverty. It also is something, the theme of the rich dad, poor dad. And then people in a state of scarcity, such as those living in poverty, have a heightened focus on scarcity that impacts their decision making ability. And so there's another study that investigates the world hunger and how there's like growing percentage of the population that's going hungry these days. And they come to the conclusion that it's not that it's limited food, that scarcity in short isn't the problem. And they say that giving it undue attention reinforces myths that get in the way of understanding hunger. Okay, it can be from delivering to the right resources, and 10 other things going to result in good things. So what happens as a result? For me, it was fear, insecurity, and competition. Okay, fear can have us react quickly to what wasn't such a frightening thing. Okay, it's a short-term decision making. Insecurity in our abilities can make us do unethical things. Okay, you have all these people taking shortcuts because they think that that's the only way. The guy next to me did that and it worked. And competition can lead to burnout at the expense of happiness. You may not even want that thing, but just because you believe that that's the thing that is special, you've wasted countless hours or countless resources to get that exact thing. There is basically, competitiveness is not necessarily bad. It can bring out good things, except when it's driven by fear rather than inspiration. Okay, wanting to be at the top has nothing wrong with it. It's just wanting to be at top because of the fear of deprivation is something that's not going to result in good things. So the point is that competition, fear, or insecurity are healthy. Even these things aren't bad in a healthy dose. Nor is the scarcity assumption, because of course there are limited resources to an extent. But when it becomes a core of who we are, it can lead to extremely undesirable consequences for ourselves. So what happens in the scarcity cycle is you have a sudden need that emerges, and your brain automatically goes into a quick fix response, and now your energy is being depleted. You're totally focusing on that at the expense of other things, and you're doing this quick self gratification things is slowly kind of taking away your self control. Eventually, your brain is exhausted because it is having to do the same thing and over again out of fear or out of need or something else. And what happens is eventually you kind of lead to a short term, you kind of end up having a short term decision making process, which I can tell you from experience can never lead to anything good. Okay, there has to be a balance between short term thinking and long term thinking. So what happens with short term thinking? So you go to school and you study the subjects, and all you're thinking about the next day, you wake up, you get your breakfast, you brush your teeth, or you just go. So what happens is you're thinking about one day at a time, you do all that you need to do, but you have no long term plans. And eventually, since you're leading day by day, you're not deciding where your life is going, you're not planning for anything big. And therefore, nothing big will ever happen because you're set in this like very short term decision making process. Something that I've frowned upon like 5 years back was, and countless cheesies and gurus say this, and it annoys me, is actually quite true that we're all in this together and it's a cycle of give and take. And if you actually believe in abundance, you kind of start seeing that there's a million other solutions apart from the one that you are focusing on because of fear. And just know that there's a lot. It's just that we're not often looking in that direction and process. Anyways, thanks a lot and have a good day.